Hey, good evening. Thank you for joining us on the Political Deep Dive tonight. I am Dave Valente, joined this week by AJ. How you doing, AJ?
I'm doing very well. Happy
Yeah.
New Year.
Happy New Year. How'd you spend your New Year?
I ate sushi and watched anime, like,
That,
a true American.
that sounds like a lot of fun. I ate my weight in sausage balls and watched a lot of football yesterday. My wife is a huge Georgia Bulldogs fan. She was a nervous wreck until about midnight last night, and then she's not sure she can go through the national championship game next week against TCU. But it was a very exciting game last night, and uh, right now I don't want to look at any sausage balls. So other than that, that's a full night for me. I was happy to get to 2023. It seems like the years are going faster and faster now. As I get older, the time compresses for me, and it's really cool to get. I never thought I'd make it to 2023.
It is a
This is
little
my
bit wild.
50th year, so I turned 50 in July, and it doesn't seem real. Like young me cannot conceptualize that I've gotten to this point. So,
Yeah, I
but
didn't think I would live this long either.
yep. It's amazing. All right. Well, tonight we're going to talk with potential presidential candidate Chase Oliver. Those of you who are, you're in the Liberty movement, you know what's going on. Chase ran for the 2020 Senate race in Georgia, did phenomenally well, forced a runoff. Oh, we got Dan joining us as well. Let him get all set up. But
The Dan
uh,
Fishman.
the Dan Fishman, not just a Dan Fishman, the Dan Fishman. But he ran for U.S. Senate, did phenomenally well, forced a runoff. I know a lot of pundits like to have called him the most hated. If you actually know Chase at all, Chase is a fine human being, and I love Chase and love having him on the show. But was raked over the coals by Democrats and Republicans alike, and unfairly so, because he has been an advocate for things like ranked choice voting, which would have stopped all the crap that people had to do for the last 6 weeks, or the 6 weeks after the election. But hey, Chase Oliver, thank you, sir, for joining us. Oh, wearing his Tennessee orange tonight.
Oh yeah, I got to be representing my college football team. We kicked Clemson's ass, so I got to say, go Big Orange.
In the most orange of Orange Bowls, Clemson,
the Big Orange Bowl.
Yeah, it was like extra orange. And
yeah, I enjoyed college football too, though. My New Year's Eve was spent watching Dolly Parton and Miley Cyrus tear the house down, and give probably the best New Year's Eve concert that's ever happened. So I was flipping back to the Georgia game too, but I didn't see the whiffed field goal. So I was too busy watching Dolly Parton sing Wrecking Ball and Miley Cyrus sing I Will Always Love You into midnight, which was pretty awesome.
Nice.
For a Tennessee boy like me, seeing that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever been to Dollywood?
Oh yes, I have been to Dollywood. Yes, I have been to Dollywood. My mother has crafts from Dollywood.
Nice.
I was somewhere in Tennessee when we were moving from North Carolina to New Mexico back in 1987. I think there was a bronze statue of Dolly there somewhere in Tennessee. I don't even remember where I was at. And my grandmother's on one side of me, and my mom's on the other side of me, and I was like, they bronzed them, and I got slapped from both sides. So, all All right. So, Chase, let's talk about the run that you just had. You just got done with your Senate run. You faced Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, the sitting senator of Georgia. Um, uh, you know, both camps tried to ignore you, but at least the Warnock camp did eventually try and get you on the stage, or at least let you on the stage in the debates. Talk about that. Talk about the race a little bit.
Yeah, it was a fun race. I have to say, as a libertarian, it was very easy for me to run against both of those people because neither of them really represent liberty or individual rights or anything like that. They represent business as usual in Washington. You can see that today with Raphael Warnock touting how great it was that he voted for the NDAA. No one puts the war in Warnock like Raphael Warnock. So.
Nice.
I think what you're seeing there is you're going to see a continuation, 6 more years of business as usual. And I was happy to provide voters with a real alternative. 81,000 showed up. It forced the runoff. I have a jar full of duopoly tears that keeps me going. And I was happy to throw a monkey wrench into their process while also advocating for a solution like ranked choice voting that, leave it to the libertarian to actually have like the real solution to the thing instead of just complaining. Like when in the debate, you mentioned I had a debate with Senator Warnock. The subject of runoffs came up, and I said, well, we just need to pass ranked choice voting. We'll never have runoffs again if we pass ranked choice voting. Raphael Warnock's brilliant solution was, well, if you don't want runoffs, just vote for me, which is like, nothing is more insulting to people than like, hey, if you don't want us to fuck up your Thanksgiving, you better vote for me, because that's pretty much what he did on television.
It's actually extortion.
Yes,
If you
it
don't
is
vote for
extortion.
me,
Vote for me. You're going to have politics over your Thanksgiving dinner.
you've got
It's so
real nice
insulting.
election. It would be ashamed if something happened to it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I was happy to throw a monkey wrench in the duopoly while also providing a real solution that is now being talked about in the state. Ranked choice voting was at like 10% approval in Georgia before the election. It is now at over, the last poll was almost at 40% in terms of, and if we're going to get rid of, if you want to either get rid of the runoffs, keep the runoffs, or go to ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is growing in support. And I think part of that is I was loudly touting it throughout the campaign, and people are now seeing that there's a reason to have it instead of waiting weeks to, go back and vote again.
And it would have been such a great race because I think your numbers would have been a lot higher, because I think there's a lot of people in that race who voted for Warnock just because like they didn't like Warnock, but they thought Walker was terrible. And, same thing around it. There's a lot of people who didn't want to vote for Herschel Walker, but, they felt like I can't vote for Raphael Warnock, so that's all I can do. I don't want to waste the vote. Ranked choice voting would have fixed all of that.
Well, and I want to encourage anybody who's in Georgia who's listening to me to start organizing to get ranked choice voting passed in the next legislative session. It starts next, in the next couple of weeks. We're going to have the legislative session ramping up, and they're going to try to do away with runoffs altogether and just go to either plurality voting or make the threshold for runoffs 45% of the vote, which is stupid. The whole point of a runoff is to get somebody with over 50% support. So what they're doing is they're now trying to rig the game against libertarians and other third parties. So we need to start organizing. Libertarians in Georgia need to start organizing for ranked choice voting because it's the best solution that is likely to pass legislatively. And we need to start partnering with anybody who wants to pass ranked choice voting. We don't have to agree with them on like policy, but in terms of like the actual voting mechanisms, we could partner with people like the Forward Party of Georgia. There are Republicans and Democrats who are open to doing this. There was a Democrat who introduced this legislation in the last legislative session. It didn't go anywhere, but that's because there wasn't the movement behind it. So we need to start calling our state senators and our assembly, our Georgia assembly members, and ask them to adopt ranked choice voting to fix the system in a way that saves taxpayers money. I think, if I can be the last person to ever force an expensive and costly runoff to the taxpayers, I believe that's a pretty cool legacy for me to have. But in order to do that, we have to pass ranked choice voting.
And you said that it's going to be introduced into the legislative level?
Yes. So the Secretary of State has said he's going to bring several different ideas to the state legislature. He has not indicated whether he's going to support any one of them in particular, but it's looking like the Republicans are wanting to throw the threshold down to 45%. Democrats, they're kind of, and what we need to do is we need to pair this with, ballot access reforms too, so that more people can run in the state. But, I was happy to provide voters an alternative, an articulate alternative to Raphael Warnock, as opposed to Herschel Walker, who wasn't even able to really show up to both debates. He picked the only debate that I wasn't invited to actually show up, because I think if he had been on stage with somebody who could really represent limited government and like true fiscal conservatism, like, I'm not a conservative by any means. Like, I believe you should be able to live and let live. I'm pretty socially like tolerant of things. But as far as money and like the size of government goes, I am way more fiscally conservative than a Herschel Walker would have been. And I would have been able to go on stage and be like, let's talk about entitlements, Herschel. Let's talk about what government you do want to cut, because I can actually name the things that I want to cut in government to get our government back to a balanced budget. Right. And he couldn't. And so like, that's why he avoided me. He was scared. He could not suit up and get on the field and play ball, as opposed to the actual Georgia Bulldogs who kicked ass last night.
I think about that time when Rick Perry was on stage with Ron Paul. And he said, I want to cut these all departments, but I can't remember what their names are. Help me, Ron Paul. Help me. Herschel Walker would have been just as lost. It's a shame that didn't happen. Do you think, Chase, is there talk that he has legs? Does he have a future career? Is he going to run for something else?
Herschel Walker?
Yeah.
No, he will not run for anything ever again. I think his son pretty much saw fit to that. He torpedoed any chance. I mean, Herschel Walker, frankly, torpedoed any chance with his behavior throughout his life and the way he's conducted himself throughout this campaign. I don't think he'll ever run for anything ever again. I think that he's going to do anything, he's going to run back to Texas, where he lives anyways, and continue and retire there with his millions of dollars and not really worry about the people of Georgia. He didn't really worry about them anyways. He ran because Donald Trump wanted him to run. And his own son admitted that. Like, his own son said Trump called him multiple times, you got to run, you got to run. And as we've seen, candidates that are backed by Donald Trump, they got their ass whipped in a lot of the major races. And, Georgia, I think, is in particular, their Republican Party is definitely a not Trumpy Republican Party compared to a lot of other states, because you have people like Brian Kemp, who, Trump tried to torpedo him in the primary. You had Raffensperger, who, he refused to find the 11,000 votes, and yet they both still won overwhelmingly. So, they're a little less Trumpy here. I mean, they're still Republicans. They're still they still like to use the power of government to impose their moralistic viewpoint on our state. But at least they're not Donald Trump MAGA freaks as much as possible. Marjorie Taylor Greene notwithstanding.
Yeah. Now, a good point by Michael Kelly. So, I mean, even where Raphael Warnock did debate you, he did his best to pretty much just ignore what you were saying. Like, he really, I mean, he did have a couple points where he addressed you directly, but he whenever you made points, he kind of went off, like you said, with the ranked choice voting and, just vote for me. He just tried his best to ignore what you were saying.
Yeah, well, I actually answered the questions that the moderators asked of me. He did not do that the entire campaign or the entire debate. So I like to tell people, Walker wasn't even there. So I debated an empty lectern and an empty suit, because Raphael Warnock could not answer the questions that the press moderators had for him. He walked away the entire time. And frankly, it's because, he didn't read the bills. That was one of the things that if you want to see a funny moment, here's a great, looking back in the past year, if you want to see a funny political moment of 2022, watch that debate and watch when I ask Raphael Warnock if he actually reads the bills or if he just takes Chuck Schumer's word for it. And what happens is Raphael Warnock immediately resets his brain back to 2020, because the first thing out of his mouth is, we are in the midst of a historic pandemic. And it's like, we're actually in 2022. We're well beyond the midst of it. Like, we're at this point, shit's getting back to normal. But his brain reset to 2020 because he couldn't comprehend that somebody would be like, you don't even read this stuff. And if I had been elected to the United States Senate, if I were going to the Senate in January, let's say this giant omnibus bill that was thousands of pages that no one read, I would never vote for it. You could put any kind of incentive you want in there, but if you're poisoning it with.
What an incredibly honest answer this is, because Chase said he wouldn't vote for it. He didn't say I would read it first, because there wasn't enough time to read it. It was impossible for anybody to read it before the vote. No. That's why you would be awesome, and why I worry that you'll never get elected, because you are so honest, Chase.
Well, that's the thing is now fast forward to where we're at now. I'm kind of I formed this exploratory committee. I've started traveling across the country to speak to libertarians about what we could possibly need for a 2024 nominee. And someone we need is going to be somebody who's brutally honest. Like, I am willing to go up to people and say, yes, we need to balance our federal budget to get inflation under control. And yes, that's going to cause a shock to the economy. Like Milton Friedman said, when you take the alcohol away from the drunk, yeah, he has the DTs for a few days, but ultimately he's going to be healthier when we remove the drug from him. And we have to remove the drug of overspending from Washington, D.C. And we have to have somebody who's brave enough to admit that there will be a shock. There will be people who lose their jobs when we do that. But ultimately, in the long term, we're actually going to have true prosperity for the future generations. And I'm somebody who's able to speak the libertarian message, I think, in a way that non-libertarians can resonate with. That's my favorite group of people to talk to. I love talking to libertarians. Don't get me wrong. I love being in a room full of libertarians, and I love throwing that libertarian red meat out there. But what I really like to do is bridge the divide and speak to non-libertarians, people who aren't libertarian yet, and bring them into the tent and bring them into the movement for freedom, because that's how we're going to grow. That's how we're going to start winning elections. And we need somebody in 2024 who is willing to speak that message to the non-libertarians and to bring them in so that we can help the down tickets, so that we can help the people who are running for mayor and for city council and for Congress. That's what we need in a 2024 candidate. That's one of the reasons why I'm exploring this stuff, because we need a radical messenger of freedom who is going to actually attract people and who doesn't feel like they have to be controversial. And I'm not speaking for one wing or another of the party. I'm speaking for the libertarian movement. And I have to understand that awesome responsibility. It's like, I said this the other day in a group, when you are on social media, right, and you're responsible for an affiliate's message, or when you're responsible for a company's message, you're not speaking for just yourself. I mean, you can, but that's irresponsible to do, because you actually have more than just yourself backing you. So whoever our 2024 nominee is, they can't just speak for themselves. They can't just speak for one wing of the Libertarian Party or one wing of the Libertarian movement or the other. They have to accept the awesome responsibility of speaking a message that can resonate both within our party and also to a bunch of people who have never heard of us before and who can actually go, hey, this is a great idea. I need to vote outside the two-party system. And to do that, we have to start targeting the Gen Zs of the world. We have to hit these 18 to 21-year-olds who have not yet ever voted for president before. We need to make sure that their first vote for president is outside of the duopoly, because if you do that, if their first major vote is outside the two-party system, for the rest of their lives as voters, they're going to look at all of the options on the ballot and not just the top two. But if they get stuck in the R or D cycle from the very beginning, it's very hard to pull them out of that. So we need to start the generational change right now. It is time for us to harness the power of Gen Z. They're about to be the largest voting bloc in the next 10 years. They're going to wipe out the boomers in terms of the way that they vote. And we're seeing right now that they are not, and even millennials are not turning conservative like most generations do as they get older. So it's time to harness millennials and Gen Z, and yes, the Gen Xers out there who are ready to jump on board too, because we are the people who are going to be most affected by the decisions government's making right now. So it's high time that the people who are in charge of the decisions that government is making, the people who are going to be most affected by these decisions, are the ones who are making the decisions. That's what we have to do. I cannot rely on Joe Biden, who's going to be 80-something years old on the next election day, to be working in the best interests of my generation. Frankly, he lost all respect for that because he supported the wars that my generation has been put through for the last 20 years. His generation has lost all trust. They don't deserve that trust. They have broken that trust. They don't get to earn it back. We need to take the power back. It's time for us to take the power back from these people and give it back to each and every individual. That's what we need in a 2024 nominee. And that's the message I'm going around to speak to libertarians all across the country. Because if we're going to make a difference, if we're going to push the Overton window towards liberty and freedom, we have to have somebody who's willing to say we need a generational change. And it's high time these old fucks in DC get the fuck out. And that's my platform. And that's why I'm exploring 2024.
Here. So, it's interesting because you talked about Biden, and we have this big scandal going on with the congressman from New York who lied about all this stuff. Nobody's talking about the fact that Joe Biden has been lying and misrepresenting his resume for years, just as bad, and that's why I'm so excited that an honest guy, with a real resume. Now, if you were going to embellish your resume, Chase, if you were going to make up something crazy to say about yourself, what would that crazy thing be?
That I am the #1 Star Trek fan on Earth, and that nobody can beat me to that. And I actually, I have a Starfleet badge, so I am apparently a member of Starfleet. You know, I ran against a guy who whipped his badge out and talked about what he can do. So like I have my Starfleet badge, so I'm officially a member of Starfleet. So I'm actually capable of space travel.
So I tell you, I think it would have been an awesome moment during the debate if, like, you had said, you know, Herschel Walker had his badge, and you just ripped open your shirt and you had a Starfleet uniform on.
Okay, so fun fact: I had my Starfleet badge in my jacket pocket during the debate, and I knew I was not going to whip it out during the debate because it was going to cause a whole freaking thing, and I didn't want to do it. But I knew I was going to have a press avail afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I go start taking questions to the press. And the whole time I just forgot that it was in my pocket. And I realized as I'm getting in the Uber, like to go back home, I'm like, what's this in my, crap. I forgot the joke. Like I forgot the joke. But yeah, so, you know, that would be my embellishment, but you know, my real resume, you know, I've been a liberty activist. Even before I was a libertarian, I was an anti-war activist. Like the first time I was tear gassed by my government was when I was protesting the war in Iraq on a trip to DC. So that's how I got my start in politics, is because frankly, it's very personal for me. You know, I went to high school with a guy named Joey, and I helped him graduate because he was not the best at political systems and economics, which was a class I very much enjoyed. And so I helped this guy graduate, and he wrote in my yearbook, keep a lookout for me on the TV. I'll be in Baghdad this time next year. And all I could think is like, wow, like, what a waste. Like, what a waste of a really good guy to be sent to a fucking war that's based on lies. Like, and even at this point, like, you know, anybody who had a brain in their head knew that that war was completely based on lies. And so that's what got me to be an anti-war activist. I started protesting the wars. You know, there was a vibrant, what we called the anti-war movement back then. And then Barack Obama got elected. You know, I fought for Obama to be elected. I was a Democrat back then because I thought, again, there was only two choices. That's the thought that was in my brain back then. That's the thing that we need to kick out of Gen Z right now. We need to break that notion. But I was in the notion there was only two choices. So I was a Democrat. I fought to get Obama elected because I thought this guy is going to end the wars. He's going to stop the drones. He's going to close down Gitmo, and we're going to give him a Nobel Peace Prize for it. And only one of those things happened. It was the Nobel Peace Prize. He did nothing to earn it. And that's when I was like, you know what? I need to start organizing to oppose the wars now that Obama's perpetrating them. And I started trying to call all my friends, hey guys, let's organize. Let's do this stuff. And nobody answered the call. And that's when I realized the real thing is they weren't really an anti-war movement. They were an anti-Bush movement, anti-Republican movement, and they were using the wars as an excuse to just oppose Republicans. But as soon as it got into their guy doing it, they completely forgot about what was going on. And that's what pushed me away from the Democratic Party. Thank God it did, right? That's the one silver lining of the terrible foreign policy of Barack Obama, is that it pushed me out of the Democratic Party. And I happened to be at the Gay Pride Festival in 2010, and there was John Mons with the LP Georgia, and they made me a libertarian because I got a drink in my hand, and I see this guy. It's John Mons. I see him over there, and he's like, "Come on over here, because he sees me looking at the tent, and he's like, "Take this world's smallest political quiz." I'm like, I don't really got time for that. He goes, "Well, just name your biggest issue." And I bet you're a libertarian. And I was like, "I'm anti-war." And he goes, "You are definitely a libertarian because we're the anti-war party." And that's what brought me here. And full circle, John Mons is now running for state senate down in South Georgia. So you know, if folks want to support him, you know, get with his campaign and support him. He'll be having stuff rolling out in the coming weeks. I look forward to going down there and knocking on doors for him because he's an amazing person. If you don't know John Mons, he is a legit libertarian badass, and I'm proud that he is my political mentor. And that he once said that I was the best vote that he ever earned. I take that awesome. with a lot of pride. So
nice. Now, you and I were we both backed John Mons in 2020 in the primaries for the Libertarian nomination. He's fantastic. I love John. I think he's one of the best spokespersons for liberty, and I'm looking forward to see what he does down there in South Georgia.
Oh yeah, down in Cairo. It's spelled Cairo, but they call it Cairo.
Cairo, Georgia.
First libertarian to earn 1 million votes in our state. Million vote Mons, and
first libertarian to earn 1 million votes, because no presidential candidate had done it before he did.
Yep. And also he was the first African American candidate for governor in the state of Georgia. Don't let people say Stacey Abrams was. She wasn't. She also wasn't the first gubernatorial candidate to march in Atlanta Pride. That was also John Mons in 2010. That's when Democrats were too scared to be seen with the gay community because they were scared of alienating suburban voters. So, you know, again, like as per usual, the Libertarian Party was ahead of the mainstream. One of the things I like to say that makes me proud to be a libertarian is if you've ever seen how a river is formed, right? There is always a creek or like a stream that carves the path before the river comes. That's called being ahead of the mainstream. That's what the Libertarian Party has always been when it comes to ending the drug war, when it comes to a peaceful, non-interventionist foreign policy, when it comes to justice reform, when it comes to immigration reform,
Legalizing cannabis.
Yeah. When it comes to gun rights, gay rights, you know, when it comes to all of these issues, the Libertarian Party was ahead of the mainstream. We carved the path 50 years, you know, like 45 years before gay marriage was legalized. We had libertarians saying that if you're going to have marriage, it should be equal for everybody. If you know, before we had this major movement towards green innovation, we had libertarians saying, let the market free itself and we will solve our climate problems if you just deregulate and let us do what we need to do. And that's the truth. And so I'm proud to be a libertarian. I think more people need to be proud of being a libertarian. And I do want to say this. I know there's this past year has been a tumultuous year for the Libertarian Party. Let's just be real, right? Like there was a lot of animosity going into our national convention in Reno, Nevada. And I know a lot of people feel some sort of way, one way or the other about this whole thing. What I want to say is if you have pushed yourself on the sidelines, if you have felt down about things, I want you to know that there is a place for you in this party. There's a place for you in this movement. And there's a place for you on this exploratory committee. I want people to know that they can put their resources towards something. And at the end of the day, candidates are the people that are most paid attention to. I spent the last few weeks traveling around, not just talking to libertarians, but also non-libertarians in cafes and planes and, you know, places all over the country. And the biggest thing that people said is, oh, libertarians like Gary Johnson or like Joe Jorgensen. They didn't say libertarians like the current makeup of the LNC. They don't. That's just the truth of it. We can have our internal party squabbles, and I understand those things going on. But at the end of the day, we are libertarians, and we need to represent a true third path in our policy, which is one of liberty and one of coming together to oppose authoritarian coercion, force, and violence from the state. That's our party. That is why we are here. We're not here to fight the culture war. You know what? I believe in a free market of ideas. And I believe that in a free market of ideas, culture will take care of itself. It doesn't need government action to take care of it one way or the other. So I think when it comes to things like the culture war, you know, our answer as libertarians need to be, that's not what government is there to do. Government is there to do very minimal things, extremely small things. In some people's cases, government is there to not exist. You know, I'm a minarchist, so I do believe there is a minimal framework of government that needs to exist, to be fair. But anarchists, you guys are our friends too, you know. But at the end of the day, we need to put our energy in towards something that's going to be productive. And internal party squabbling and just continuing to fight each other and you know, and I say this to the people who took over the party too. It's not working, and it's not going to continue to. It's not going to create success. If we want to create success, we need to change our path and towards a path that's going to be more responsive and more resonant and resonates more with the average voter. Because right now we're fighting within an echo chamber of an echo chamber of an echo chamber. And if we're ever going to be effective as a political party and start getting more people elected and really start pushing that Overton window, we have to stop that. And I'm ready to be somebody who is representing that kind of messaging. I don't want to represent one wing of the party. And if you're a candidate for president who wants to represent one wing of the party and push some other people out, you should not be our nominee. You should not, because you are cutting people out. You're already putting people on the sidelines when we cannot afford it. We cannot afford one activist to be on the sideline. And so if your mission is, hey, I'm going to run so that we can shove these people out of the party, that's not going to be productive, and that's not going to be a winning formula.
So how do you? Well, wait a minute. How do you bring people back in? Now that's the one of the challenges I have. Like for me, I work for the federal government. I can't be in a political party that says we believe in secession. I mean, it just I can't have that hanging over me.
A political party that tweets that Black people should either shut up about reparations or go back to Africa.
Oh, and
Yeah.
you trust me, I have a problem with that messaging. I think
Yeah.
most people do. But if we're going to bring people back to the party, we have to bring them back to the party with the messaging of we can change that. We have to change that. And let me tell you right now, I don't believe everybody who voted for the current makeup of the LNC in Reno is really happy with the messaging that's coming out of this party.
I agree with that 100%.
I sincerely know this. You know why? Because I sat next to people who, they were voting the way the Ron Paul paddles told them to go. But at the end of the day, they are not happy with where things are right now. And they have told me personally, hey, I voted for the slate in Reno because I was told this was going to happen, and then it didn't. I was told we were going to have massive growth. I was told we were going to get a bunch of fundraising. I was told there were a bunch of people who were sitting on the sidelines just waiting for this to happen, and then everything was going to be dandy, and it's not been. And I don't have a problem. And let me just be frank. I do not have a problem with every single member of the caucus that took control. I have severe problems with their leadership structure and the people who are on top. And frankly, I think if they held caucus elections and regularly rejuvenated their leadership, there would be a lot less problematic messaging coming from those folks. But I don't have an ill will towards each and every member. In fact, I know people who are a member of the Mises Caucus who are hardworking libertarian activists who just believe that this is the best vehicle. And I'm here to tell you that, we've looked at how it's gone over the last year. It has not been a very successful vehicle. I have not gotten and I know it sounds stupid, right? To be like, I haven't gotten a newsletter. But if you cannot produce a newsletter to send to your membership, there are severe problems going on. There's a severe drain of institutional memory at the staff level. Like, we do not have political people. We do not have candidate people. We have Twitter people. And that's a problem. I want a political party that is robust and ready to work and ready to get structured and put together. And frankly, I think there is still plenty of people who can do that. I think there are plenty of people who can join this party and actually be willing activists if we had people willing to actually say, you know what, the path that we took, this messaging is not working and we need to go a different path. And we need to actually be aware, and understand brand awareness. That's the truth. Any company, we have to treat this like a business. Any company that would see this kind of negative PR, short of, who doesn't want their stock to spiral downward, needs to understand that this is not the best path. But we need to make sure to tell people that, there's this libertarian moment that we have now. The Republican Party is going through a similar situation, right? They just had a MAGA takeover of their party for the last 6 years. And there are now people who are like, okay, we're going to get back to normal Republicans, which I'm not a fan of them. I don't think their policy is great, but I understand what establishment republicanism is. And the party is starting to slowly peel themselves away from this populist movement that took over the party for a few years, because they're now seeing the negative results. They've seen multiple election cycles now where the MAGA movement does not deliver the goods that it says it's going to. And I don't think we as a third party can afford to wait several election cycles for that. We are already seeing the numbers. And so I think we need to be realistic, and the people in charge need to be realistic and take a look at these things and say, what can we do better? And they need to be humble enough to admit that things are not going as great as they said they were going to go, and start working to repair the bridges of the people that they pushed out, because that's what happened. We had a major institutional brain drain in the internal part of the party. And we had that happen in 1980. And if you look back at our history, that happened in 1980. And what happened was you had people like Cato get formed because people took their energy out of the party and they took it somewhere else. I don't want them to take it somewhere else. I want them to stay in the party. I want to continue to organize and grow. We had millions of voters in the last 2 election cycles for president. We can do better than that. But if we're going to do that, we have to just be honest with ourselves and be frank. And I'll be the first to say, and let me just say this right now, I will be the first to say that the people who were in charge before this newest group, they were not perfect either. They were not like some sort of libertarian ideal of perfection. There was problems. There's always room to improve. But at least those folks could take the criticism sometimes and actually improve things. And that's what we have to have. And I'll admit, I'm not the perfect person either. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's the perfect libertarian. Let's just get real with that. I'm tired of playing who's the most perfect libertarian in the room. Nobody's the perfect libertarian, if you got Mises, Hayek, and Bastiat all in a room together, they would argue who the perfect libertarian is amongst them,
But I think where a lot of people sort of are sticking is that So, and I'm a minarchist as well. I think that there's a lot of issues on which people say, on these fundamental things, we can't compromise. You know, the idea of human respect, okay, the idea of consent culture, right? I mean, there's another person who might be running against you who said that if you give a woman 12 shots and she didn't want to have sex with you before, but then she doesn't stop you, that's not rape. Okay,
And let
don't
me
we
be
have to
frank.
have?
Let me address that, right? Let me
Yeah,
address that singular comment, and there's many others like it. And I'll be
yeah,
real with you. He can say, and someone can try to explain that away, and be like, "Oh, I was joking. I'm a comedian. This, that, and the other." But the truth is the average voter is not going to take the time to understand that. They're going to hear the sound clip, and then that's it. That's your Aleppo moment. You're done. You're done. And we can't afford to have a libertarian candidate who's going to have an Aleppo moment literally every 5 minutes. And that's what would happen. The duopoly would basically comb through and find statements like that, and anytime any traction happened, they would drop it. And that's what happened. And that's what would happen. And so, Gary Johnson got one Aleppo moment. How many gaffes did Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump get in their campaigns? A lot. We got one Aleppo moment, and it tanked us. We cannot afford. We're already playing with a handicap. And so, like, you can explain that away, or you can say whatever you want, and you can say I wasn't serious or whatever, but the voters aren't going to take the time to understand that. And that's just the truth of it. So you can even say, even if you give benefit of the doubt to that messenger, that message is going to tank a libertarian campaign. And I think if that person was being responsible, they would probably decide to find somebody else to be their standard bearer if they want somebody else to be their standard bearer. I mean, that's the reality of it.
yeah. And I mean, I think that's where, I represent a lot of the people who have, I'm somebody who has left the party. I don't give money anymore. I support local state libertarians. I sent some money to the Oliver campaign. But there's a lot of truth to that Southern Poverty Law Center report. There's a lot of things that are so broken at this point in time. And, one of the things that we talked about, or that you had said earlier, was that, I want to say that there's a place for everybody. I don't agree with that. I don't think that there is a place for everybody.
So let me say this. Gary Johnson got 5 million votes. Joe got like just under 2 million votes, something like that. There's a lot more libertarian voters and libertarian people than the 1,000 people who are delegates to this party.
Yeah.
And we need to understand that. And if we're going to be a party that actually represents the greater libertarian movement and the greater libertarian party, we have to start harnessing that activist energy and saying, listen, we need, get 50 people to your state convention.
Yep.
Like, that's just the reality of it. Like,
so that is,
and there's standing on the sidelines, or there is willing to start working towards getting the party back to its original messaging and start actually pushing that radical message of liberty, as opposed to just some sort of like makeshift, semi, in many areas, semi-libertarian policy on things as a way to like, okay, well, this is our reaching out to the, let me just say this. We've been reaching out to the right for 30 years. We have been. Since 1980, we've been reaching out to the right as libertarians. They have not wanted our help. Guess who? There's a lot of people on the sideline, people who want to work on things like justice reform and immigration reform and ending wars, who, maybe they're not like the most fiscally libertarian people, but I want them to vote for me regardless. I'm not going to like expand the role of government or like, raise taxes on everybody. But I would, if I were running, fight for justice reform and immigration reform and these things. And I believe that there's an area where libertarians can speak to an entire section of the electorate that we just keep on the sidelines. And we need to be broader with our messaging when it comes to the national platform. That's the whole point, is we need somebody who can speak for the entire organization. And that is not just left libertarians. That's not just right libertarians. That's all libertarians. And Alabama, like this comment says, is a perfect example. It's a red state. There are a lot of areas where you can get a libertarian on the ballot and actually compete because of the way that things are structured in Alabama. I'm actually going to be traveling to Alabama in a couple weeks. I'll be in Alabama and Mississippi and I plan on meeting with some libertarians and getting involved in some activism down there. You know, uh, I think we can really bring the party back to prominence, but it's going to require us to get behind something. And if that something is this exploratory committee, I'm more than happy for that to be the vehicle for people. And I encourage them to get up and sign up on the website, votechaseoliver.com. It's very easy to remember. Sign up for email updates, and let's see what we can do as I travel around here. And I do need people to sign up. Like I already have. Let me just put it to you this way: in terms of a kind of a campaign or exploratory structure, right? Let's look at where I'm at. I've already got coordinators in about a third of the states, and I'm growing that every day in terms of people who can help coordinate actions and activities and start to produce an actual skeleton frame of what a campaign would look like. That's a great thing to do at this exploratory phase. I already have professional branding, which means I'm already ahead of the last campaign for president because it took a couple months to get that professional branding out off the gate, right? Like I've already started to travel and speak with people. I've already been to 4 states in the last month. I'm going to be into another 20 in the next 3 months, God willing, if I can get enough folks to help support this movement. That's the whole point of the exploratory phase, is to see if there's enough support at this juncture to move forward with a campaign where I would be the head of it. And I'm hoping folks who feel like they've been a little left out or that they've been pushed out since Reno, that here's a place where you can take haven. You can seek haven here and find somewhere where you can be a libertarian and be happy to do it and put your resources towards something that is going to, hopefully create a growing, bigger tent for this party so that we can start having libertarians win elections all over the country. That's what we want. We want libertarians to win. So that way libertarians can get the reins of government, release those reins back to each and every individual person. So, that's why I'm traveling around and doing this. I'm not doing this, certainly not because I like to try. I hate flying on planes. So the fact that I'm going to be flying on planes for the next few months is testament to the fact that I am literally like facing a fear that I hate doing. Hate being in a little aluminum tube that's thousands of feet in the air, like, whatever. We've seen that geese can take that shit out. So, so I'm willing to start traveling around and meeting people all over because I want this party to actually have a viable alternative to Joe Biden and Donald Trump in 2024, because it's frankly time that we have somebody who's not like an 80-year-old trying to run this country. And right now, the 80-year-olds are running this country into the ground. And it's going to be our generations that are going to be having to pay for it and deal with it. I would take the Corolla, but it takes too long for me to drive across the country. And I've been invited to go up to Alaska in April, and that's a very long drive. I don't think the Corolla can make it to the Northwest Territories.
Yeah, that would be quite a haul.
Yeah, I was going to say the Can-Am Highway, I don't think is open in April. So
I'll put skis on the bottom of the Corolla and let dogs pull it.
There you go. So what are as a campaign, switching into campaign mode, what are the big hot button issues that you're going to push on the campaign?
Oh yeah, so I definitely want to talk about issues that are going to resonate, like I said, with Gen Z. So one of the things I want to talk about is, in addition to ranked choice voting, I think ranked choice voting is something that we should have our 2024 candidate talking about, because it does actually allow third-party voters to be able to vote without fear of spoiler. So that needs to be something we do talk about to folks to start priming that pump in states across the country. But in terms of like libertarian, I want to balance the budget like today. Like I am a big believer in the balanced budget. Here's why I say this. Now, I want to audit and end the Fed. I think that's good policy. I don't believe in central banking. I don't like it. But to explain the Fed to the average voter takes time. But what doesn't take time is to say, balance the budget today. Quit printing money out of thin air so that our money doesn't get overinflated. And so that we can, and I tell people all the time, we had a balanced budget like 23 years ago. So what is now seen as a radical idea was actually a rational idea 23 years ago. It was the idea that most Americans supported. And it was actually, if we look at the balanced budget years in the 1990s, and as we cut deficits, we had the largest economic growth and prosperity and growth of the middle class that we've ever had in this country in the 1990s. Those two things are not unrelated to each other. And I think that's a message we can speak to voters to say, hey, get the spending under control so that way we don't have our money, so eggs don't cost like 15% more than they did last year. That's the economy, stupid. Like that's something that we have to talk about is getting our spending under control. We've printed so much money out of thin air. Other things that I think are big, immigration reform is going to be a huge issue in the next couple of years. And we have to be taking the leadership on it. We have to be somebody who's willing to say, we have to be taking the lead on free movement of people, labor, and capital. Like, that's the libertarian way. Like, I don't think I've ever met a real tried and true hardcore libertarian philosopher who is not saying that you can't move freely from point A to point B, or that you can't take your money and move it to where you want to move it. It's your money and it's yourself. You're allowed to be free to move where you want to go. I think we need an immigration reform that's radically simplified. It's one of the worst examples of big government. It's an area that stifles innovation. It stifles human rights. It is an area of government that abuses so many people, including you and me. Each and every one of us is actually made less free by an immigration policy which restricts the free movement of people and labor and capital. So we're going to talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that we have a justice policy that is ridiculous in this country. I would, of course, want to end the war on drugs, deschedule cannabis, obviously. But let's start talking about other things like psilocybin treatment for veterans who are facing PTSD. Oh, while we're talking about veterans, let's do away with the bullshit VA model of healthcare and just let veterans go to the hospital that's closest to them, as opposed to the hospital that's centralized and planned to be a VA hospital. You could actually save a lot of money if we did that, if we radically change that. There's a lot of areas where I want to talk about reducing and changing what government does to be more free to people. I'm sorry, I kind of ranted there for a minute, but there's so many things. I want to defend the Second Amendment. One of the things that got me noticed a lot during the campaign is that I'm armed and gay. Seem to throw the duopoly off to understand that an LGBT person might want to be able to protect themselves with a firearm, especially during the Club Q shooting. I wish there had been somebody who was concealed carrying in that club who could have taken down the shooter before he killed as many people as he did. I also encourage folks to be responsible gun owners in terms of, don't just know how to use your gun, but also go and take a certification course that you know how to apply a tourniquet correctly and pack a wound. So that way, if there is a shooting, you can not only be somebody who can be a defensive person, but you can be a proactive first responder to save lives. Because there would be more people alive today if everybody knew how to use a tourniquet. So not only do I support your right to own a gun to defend yourself from undue aggression from anybody, including the government, but I think we can also be stewards of personal responsibility and talk about that from the bully pulpit. That's one of the things about libertarianism. We are the party of personal responsibility. We can say, hey, it's a good idea to do A, but I absolutely don't think the government should ever enforce that. That's how I feel about things like seatbelts. Like, I'll wear a seatbelt. Do we need seatbelt laws? No, I don't think we do. I think it's just a way, and other than for kids, kids got to be protected. But if you're an adult and you want to be stupid and you want to fly through your windshield at 80 miles an hour, that's your dumbass. I'm going to go ahead and buckle up. And I don't need a government to be forcing me to write a ticket or scaring me to write a ticket to do that. That's just called common sense. And I think we need a lot more common sense in this country and a lot less over legislated government. And, one of the things I said when I was running for Senate that would be the least sexy thing that I would have my staff do is go line by line through the tax code and start peeling away subsidies and giveaways and carve outs so that we can lower the overall rate of taxation. I think it should be easier to start a small business. And right now, when you start a small business, you're immediately hampered by the fact that giant big businesses have already carved out the tax code and the system to benefit them and make it harder for you to compete. So I'm all about fuck corporate welfare and let you start a small business.
I got a pitch for you. There's a libertarian named Chuck Person who ran for president in the 80s, and he came up with this idea called the first three are free. There are 20 million corporations in the United States that have 0 employees. For them to have 1 employee, they have to file just as much paperwork as Walmart does to hire somebody. So Chuck's idea was, as long as your company is under 3 people, you don't have to do any paperwork. All you have to do is write them a check. If 20 million employees, 20 million corporations with 0 employees, if each of them could just hire 1 person, that's 6 million more people working. Think of the upward pressure that puts on wages. You don't have to have a minimum wage or anything else. Easy libertarian solution.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of libertarian solutions, right, that I'm someone who always can say, hey, let's talk about what the libertarian ideal is, and then what's like feasible within the reality of which we currently live, because those are two important things, and very often they're two different things. Like, right, like, again, I believe taxation is theft. I don't support the notion of taxation. Like, I think that there are ways to fund a monarchist government that doesn't involve direct taxation. But I'm also aware that taxation is a concept that has existed since like Rome, or like even pre-Rome, like, prehistory. And so the idea that we're going to completely just remove it overnight is well, it's a lofty notion indeed. So we have to be able to speak not just the libertarian ideal, like, hey, here's what the libertarian ideal is that taxation is theft. We shouldn't have any of it. We should be able to fund government with X, Y, and Z. And we should also be able to say, we live in a government that is currently this size, and the people will not do away with all taxation altogether. So what can we do to actually lower the burden of taxation on the most people and have the minimal government that we can have? I'm a big believer in the consumption tax. I think that's better than an income tax.
Fair tax, baby.
I'm a fair tax guy. I voted, the Republican I voted for, even when I was a Democrat, was John Linder, because he was my congressman. He wrote the fair tax bill. I think that's a much better model. I would do away with the income tax. In fact, if I were president, I would be pushing for a constitutional amendment to repeal the income tax and be done with it, and to say we cannot take from people's labor before they become consumers. Like, if you want to save your money, you should be able to save your money and not be taxed for it. You should only be, if you're going to be taxed, it should be taxed at the point of use and not at the point of earn. And I think that's a policy that we can actually speak to the majority of voters to understand. And again, is that the libertarian ideal? No, but that is a reality that we can make happen in this country that would make us ultimately more free as a people and push ourselves towards a more libertarian ideal. And then over time, that's how you push the Overton window with policy, right? And there's a lot of messages that we need to be able to speak to that. And we also, as libertarians, and I hate to say this, we don't need to be afraid to say that kind of stuff, because right now, somebody said we shouldn't remove all taxation overnight. Oh, they're a pariah. Like, no, they're not. They're just somebody who's working within the real world. And if we can't accept that, like, that's a recipe for us to not succeed. If we want to succeed, we have to adapt to the conditions that exist as they currently are. We can't just like wish upon a star for a libertarian world. We actually have to push that Overton window towards liberty. And we've done it. We've done it so much over the last 50 years. When you look at cannabis is the biggest example. Over half the population of this country lives in a state that has legal cannabis for recreational use, and even more for medical use. So we have pushed that Overton window. We need to not be afraid of that, to be talking about that policy. Yes, the libertarian ideal is that all drugs should be legal, right? Like, I support a decriminalization model like Portugal. But in the meantime, we have pushed that policy and also pushed the Overton window in a direction to where cannabis is now not jailing nearly as many people. We have people who are talking about psilocybin and MDMA therapies for PTSD. Like, we are starting to open up those conversations, and it's because of libertarians and people who've been pushing for liberty. We do not need to be afraid of that. We actually need to embrace that role in our politics. And that's something that I hope whomever our 2024 nominee is, I'm exploring the role right now, but whomever it is needs to accept that.
So, I mean, that was one of the things that I've had problems with libertarian politicians over the last few years, is the idea that, it has to be a 100 by 100 message on the world's smallest political quiz. And, for us to, like, people saying that, my first act as president is I'm going to shut down the government. I always challenge them with, show me where the button is. Where's the button that you turn off to flip off the government, to turn it off? It's real solutions to problems that we have that are moving that Overton window, moving us to a more freer society. Because it's not going to, I mean, it's been built over a couple hundred years now to a much less free society. We need to start moving the ship back in the other direction. But you can't do that on a dime. You've got to be able to slide it into a better direction. But, so tell people again about your campaign and how to get involved.
So yeah, my exploratory committee, if you want to go to votechaseoliver.com, you can sign up for updates, or you can donate. Please donate if you can, because that's what's going to have me traveling across the country, kind of speaking this message. The message you've been hearing me speak in this live stream, I want to be able to get in rooms with libertarians across the country and kind of speak this message and this strategy for what we need in a 2024 candidate, and see if we can get the support we need to form that structure and really start moving forward. I want to do this early, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this when I am, because one of the things I heard all through campaigns as a libertarian is, why didn't you guys start sooner? Like, I didn't hear about you guys till just now. I wish you guys had started sooner. Well, we are going to push ourselves, earlier, and we're going to start getting organized now. So that way, when it comes time for us to fight the state in 2024, we're ready to go. Like, the second convention convenes in DC, we want to be able to hit the ground running with whoever our candidate is. And I'm ready to start forming that structure. But I need people's help to do that. So go to votechaseoliver.com and donate or sign up for email updates to kind of see what I'm doing. And hopefully that encourages you to give as I travel along and start speaking with folks.
AJ, you got any questions for Chase?
So not as much a question as a comment. If you want to get Gen Z, honest to goodness, TikTok, Tumblr, and take out the trash, because there's trash in that party. And I live with Gen Z, and they watched. He watched the convention with me. He heard our friends and how people were treated, how you were treated. That's how you're going to win Gen Z. Those 3 things. That's all I got. That's it.
Yeah. And let me just say 2 things about that. So first, in terms of Gen Z, we as a party have always been the party of live and let live. Like, you can be yourself and do your own thing. And it seems like now, for Gen Z, especially for Gen Z kids who are in the LGBTQ community, that's under attack right now. And I'm a proud member of the LGBT community. You see the flag right behind me. I grew up in a time in high school when I was demonized for being a gay man. I was told that my relationships were going to doom marriage. We were going to destroy the fabric of this country. We were ripping families apart. We were predators. We were recruited. We were molested and abused and groomed. I was never any of those things. I grew up in an aggressively evangelical and heterosexual household. I had 3 brothers who were, like I said, very heterosexual. There was no grooming or recruiting going on in my family. I just was who I was. And what I got to see was an entire part of the political spectrum demonize and attack people who are just like me. And I'm seeing that resurgence now, this resurgence particularly upon the right in this country. And it hurts. It really hurts to see the fact that we have not moved past this. In fact, we have now not even just targeting gay and lesbian people. Now the target is trans and non-binary people, and particularly trans and non-binary youth, who are a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of this community. And it's because the right knows that they can scapegoat the smaller the smaller the population, the harder it is to be defended against the scapegoating. And I want to say this: if you are a Gen Z person, you should be allowed to live authentically as yourself and be yourself without fear of force, fraud, or coercion from this government. You should be allowed to be in a community that respects you and honors you. And you should be allowed to live as yourself in peace without fear of violence. And if you feel like, if you feel that struggle and that pain and that kind of heartbreak, like I feel it too, because I've been there. I have gone to sleep many a nights as a young person and felt real fear and shame and hurt from the rhetoric that was coming from people in politics. I want to say this right now. I will never be somebody who makes somebody feel ashamed for being who they are, for being their authentic self and living in peace as long as they're not hurting anybody. I will never shame you for living your life the way you see fit, because if it's different from me, that's okay. And that's a lesson I learned from Mr. Rogers when I was frickin' 5 years old. And we have far too many adults in this country who don't understand that notion, that you should be allowed to live free. You should be allowed to homeschool your kids and educate them because you think the government school systems are a joke. You should be allowed to be a trans or non-binary person because you honestly feel like you were born into a body that does not match your soul. And I'm not going to stop you from doing that. You should be allowed to live your faith and be somebody who respects your religion and your faith traditions as you hold them, because that is your sacred faith traditions. And I'm never going to deny you or harm you for those things, or seek to denigrate you or make you feel bad for those things, because that's you, and you are an individual person. Each and every person deserves that basic human respect. And as a party, that's part of being the party of personal responsibility, is we have to, sure, you are free to be a hateful person. You are free to be an asshole. You are free to be terrible. But we are also free to call you out on that. And we are free to say, you know what, that does not represent who we really are as a people, as a community, as a political party, as a movement. And we are allowed to say that. That is not canceling anybody. That is holding people to account for who they are.
Yes.
And that's the truth. And I will never walk back from that. I will constantly defend people's right to be themselves and to be authentic, because anything else is a betrayal of being a libertarian in my eyes. Because that is why I'm a libertarian, because somebody told me you can be who you are and you can be free to be who you are without government attacking you. And that's the ideal that I'm going to fight for. And that's frankly what we need to be representing the Libertarian Party in 2024.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
So-
Amanda Gibbs requested if you are a large metro area and wants to get you to come speak, what can we do? And then Tarnell said that to reach out to Steve Dasbach.
Yeah, he's helping me. He's helping me create a schedule. He's what I call my quote unquote senior advisor, in terms of like he's a senior. So he's my senior advisor, but he's a member of the committee who has taken it upon himself to help kind of make sure that I'm in as many places at once as I can possibly be. Sometimes I feel like I will be teleporting from place to place. I don't know how we're going to make it happen. We're going to make it happen.
Magic of
We also have a
2023.
great team of people on the committee who are committed to a message of liberty that's going to resonate with a lot of people. And I think we're going to lead with positivity. We cannot lead with fear and hatred, right? Like we all hate the government, right? Like we all hate the government, but just hating the government is not going to be enough. We have to provide a message that provides a positive message forward for people. Because if we don't provide that hope, the duopoly is just going to throw fear in our faces and it's going to overwhelm. And that's the truth. So we have to provide something different. We can't just provide more fear and put more static into the world. We have to provide a message that's going to cut through the white noise of duopoly and really speak a message of radical freedom. And that's something that I'm ready to do. And I hope more people are ready to do that. And I hope if folks want to get on that train and start speaking that message, go to votechaseoliver.com, sign up for updates. Please donate if you can. And let's get this train out of the station and rolling forward, and really be a real messenger for liberty. And let's like push it in 2024 and hold the duopoly accountable. And let's get a new jar full of tears. I have a jar full of their tears right now from this latest campaign, but I need a new jar by then. So let's make the duopoly cry and let's make liberty ring.
A jar to sustain us. Yes, very nice. We'll do the quiz here in a moment, but those of you, thank you for joining us tonight. Really appreciate everyone hopping on. If you can give us a chance to hop on over to our YouTube channel and talk and give us a like, a share, and subscribe, and I got a little video to show you. So check it out. Whether you're getting the best in news, politics, and pop culture each week with the Political Deep Dive, or you're enjoying the latest news from the world of hockey on the Thursday Night Hockey Show, we thank you for watching, but you may wonder how you can help grow the show. Head on over to youtube.com/papaduke. Click subscribe to see our content show up on your YouTube feed. Click on the thumbs up button on the video to let us know that you like our content. Click that bell icon to get notified when new content drops or we're live. Each of those things lets YouTube know to put this content in front of more people. The more people we get, the more people engage and improve our content. As always, we thank you for being a loyal viewer to our shows. These shows would be nothing without you. All right, so hop on over to youtube.com/papaduke. Give us a like, a share, and subscribe, whatever you can do. Doesn't cost you a thing. Just helps get us in front of more people. And so we're going to be doing some really cool things on the channel. This year, we're going to be doing a news minute, daily news minute, starting Tuesday. Just a quick little YouTube short. We're going to do shorts off of these shows just to get more exposure and have more people watching the show, so that we can get more people interested in the libertarian message and the idea of liberty as a concept and entertain them. So just look forward to doing that. And are you guys ready for the CNN News Quiz?
I'm ready.
We'll see.
We got 8 questions right last week, so we got a solid, a low B. So let's try and do better. All right. So question number 1: which U.S. city was pummeled by a fierce blizzard this week? Baltimore, Buffalo, Cleveland, or Detroit?
Buffalo.
I mean, technically speaking, Cleveland and Detroit did get some snow, but
some snow.
It was Buffalo.
Yeah,
definitely Buffalo. In fact, I saw the other day that it was still snowing off of what happened on Christmas. So I mean, it's just amazing. So a deadly winter storm buried Buffalo in 51.9 inches of snow. I couldn't imagine. And I've got friends in Buffalo. I got a lot of friends. I'm a Sabres fan, so I talked to a lot of friends who are fans of the Buffalo Sabres, and just seeing the pictures of their houses and their cars just completely buried to the roof. It was amazing. So
yeah.
Getting
meanwhile, Atlanta completely shut down over a 1 inch of snow a few years ago.
One of the craziest things was the way people turned it political too. A lot of people died in their cars, unfortunately. And one of the first things I saw was people saying, I bet you it was those electric cars people died in. When in reality, what happened was, people died from carbon monoxide poisoning from running their car engines while they were stuck in them.
Yep.
So always bring survival kits with you and try not to make everything political.
Yeah,
exactly. It will be nice. It's
there were some good stories of heroism too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there was
who, that couple who took in the Chinese tourists. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it was a bus.
Yes.
Yeah. 9 people from China who were, I don't know why they chose Buffalo to see the United States. And maybe they're going to Niagara Falls, whatever. But
yeah, probably.
They got stuck in the middle of this residential neighborhood, and they just came and knocked on the door. A couple took them in, fed them for 3 days. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I mean,
the story of the Target store is the story I saw where 20 people took refuge in a Target, and they basically just lived within the Target for a few days.
That'd be
not
amazing.
a bad place to crash. I mean,
there's
really
a
not.
Starbucks in there.
I mean, get the big screen, get the PS5, get the couch.
Yeah, exactly. Question number 2. Let's talk about which airline suffered an operational meltdown this week that resulted in thousands of flights being canceled. Alaska, Delta, American, or Southwest?
Southwest. These ones are so huge, and it was an astonishing failure too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was right at Christmas, thousands of flights. At one point, they didn't know where their pilots were.
Yeah,
and had no way of figuring out where their pilots were, which is scary for a global. It's an airline, yes, but it really, when you think about it, it's a global logistics company.
Yeah,
that you lost all your pilots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I will say this, folks who are screaming to nationalize the airlines because of the outdated technology of Southwest, I would remind them that the IRS is still using computer systems from the 70s. So you need to not nationalize airlines if they want innovation and technology, because the only way to screw up Southwest worse would be if Pete Buttigieg were in charge of it.
Well, and the funny thing about it is that everybody was flying Southwest because Southwest had been doing things so much better than everybody else for a long time. Okay, now the market's going to have a little bit of correction. A lot of people are going to say, you know what, I'm not going to lie, because here's the funny thing about it is there are a lot of airlines that are a lot cheaper than Southwest now, right? Spirit, Frontier, those guys. And you notice they didn't have a big problem like Southwest. So lots of opportunities out there. Vote with your dollars. When a company gets stuck. Now, the one other thing I will say is that Chase, and this definitely applies to you, know all the things that you are guaranteed when you fly. Like they can't rebook you without your consent, and if they cancel your flight, they have to give you money, all that stuff. I send you a good link on that.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna need it flying in the next few months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you have pre?
Oh, I'm working on getting pre.
Yeah,
trust me. Though I will say, as far as TSAs go, Atlanta's isn't the worst, and it's just because we're such a large airport. But I will say, I did enjoy watching the giant hologram "Don't Bring Your Gun" things that they have, and then I wondered how much taxpayer money went to buying hologram projectors at the Atlanta airport.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. All right. Question number 3. Which country announced this week that is dropping COVID-19 quarantine requirements for international arrivals after sealing its borders in March of 2020? Mexico, Germany, China, or Finland?
China.
China.
I'm guessing, yeah.
Yep. China said it will drop COVID-19 quarantine requirements. The early December, I had a guest who actually lived in China for a significant period of time during the pandemic as a teacher, and she had to sit in quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel. She said it was lucky that it was so early in the pandemic that she didn't have to pay for it, but later travelers did have to pay for their accommodations during those 2 weeks of quarantine. So but in response, the United States has said that we're going to require a negative COVID test in response to China opening up, because they've been having quite a run with COVID since they have loosened some of their restrictions. All right, question number 4. According to a new analysis, which percentage of California is at risk for wildfires? 25, 45, 85, or 100?
Theoretically, anywhere lightning strikes is an area that is at risk for a wildfire. So I'm on team 100, but I know that's probably, I don't know if that's the answer.
I'm going to say there's a bunch of big lakes. I don't think they'll catch on fire. So
I don't know. I mean, California is dry right now.
It's dry, but also the desert. I don't think you're going to have much of forest fires in the desert. I would guess 45, but
you know what? You don't need the desert has enough scrub that, because I've been in New Mexico where there's been a wildfire that's swept across the land, and it's quite unnerving to be traveling on a road and in 180 degree or 360 degree directions, seeing nothing but blackened earth.
Well, let's say 85, since I guess 15% of it is water.
All right. Anybody else got a guess? We have a guess.
I was going with 45.
I'm keeping a separate total for myself.
James Savannah is saying 85. All right, let's do 85. Correct.
Ding, 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 ding.
Climate crisis among the key factors in a new assessment shows that more than 85 of California's rural and unincorporated land. Now, that actually probably would have gotten me up higher if they just said rural and unincorporated land, is now a higher, very high severity zone. Interesting. All right, question number 5. The Supreme Court issued an order related to which controversial subject this week? Abortion, voting rights, campaign finance, or immigration?
That's a tough one.
I know this.
I think it's voting rights, but I'm not sure.
It's immigration.
Is it immigration? Oh, 42.
Yep.
Yeah. There is a voting rights one coming up. But you're right. Yeah, it's 42. Title 42, 43.
Yep. 42. Title 42 will remain in effect while legal challenges play out. Somebody on Twitter said that this is the consequence of Donald Trump having 3 Supreme Court nominations. This is actually the consequence of making Hillary Clinton your nominee for president in 2016. That's what the consequence is.
Yeah, because Bernie would have won. I will say, so I think it's dumb that they dropped off people in front of Kamal's house in the middle of winter. That's a terrible idea. But the idea of sharing the burden with all the other states, I don't think that's a terrible idea. I think that the northern states should be volunteering, saying, yeah, keep the buses rolling. We want to do it. We want to share in that burden. It shouldn't just be Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California
Yeah.
taking all of the travel coming over to the southern border.
I just have an issue that they're not that the people involved have no say in it, and that
That's my
they're
problem with it. It feels like kidnapping.
yeah,
It feels
essentially.
like, hey, I packed for Texas, but we're going to put you in Michigan. What? And there were
Well,
children on that
no.
bus.
But
There
what
were
is
children outside of Kamala's house.
if your rationale is that they packed for Texas? What is your rationale for why they get to come into Texas?
So
Because you don't believe in
I'm not
borders?
saying that you shouldn't do something. I'm just saying that them not having a choice feels
Yeah.
a lot like we're just moving human beings, and
well, the
that
other thing
got
is
us in
they were
trouble a
moved
couple
under
100 years
false
ago.
pretenses. They were told you're going somewhere where there's going to be stuff for you.
Yeah.
That's what's
Definitely
happened
some
on
of
every
this stuff.
time that's happened, and that
Yeah.
is irresponsible and wrong. That's fraud, and committing fraud is an abuse that I think Now, do I agree that people should be going really all over the states? Yes, I think frankly, part of the free movement in the labor of people is companies should be able to say, "Hey, I need X number of employees. Please bring them." Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
there should be a more simplified process. But then we also have to remember, like, so many people come here just by overstaying a visa. So, like, they've come across the border and they are in states all over the country. They get a visa to go to school or to have a job, and they overstay it. And so that's how we. Uh, but yeah, there's no simple answer to that, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I do like, for example, there's been a steady stream of busing to New York City. And now the mayor is complaining and saying, sorry, we're full. You know what? You can't say that because New York City has so many more resources than New Mexico does. The budget of New York City is 7 times the budget of the state of New Mexico. And so the idea that they can't cope with a population coming in, and I think a lot of people are probably very happy if they're being told, oh, you're going to New York City because, it's a major metropolitan area, a lot of jobs, stuff like that. And then there's other states that are Maine, for example. Maine has done a huge job. They've been doing everything they can to bring in immigrants from French West Africa because they have a connection there. Maine, French is the second language. And so they've been bringing in Somalis and they've been thrilled about it because they're desperate for labor. There are plenty of places like that in the United States, especially in the North, where they would love to have people come in. And yet you don't see any of those people saying, please bring everybody from the border to here. We've got jobs and stuff like that. You see a lot of people. And so I don't approve of moving people against their will, but I do think that it's funny to see New York say, oh, we're full. We're full after 3 weeks of you busing people to us.
Sure. I
The
think
process would be a good idea.
yeah,
But
have a process
if
where
I cross the border
Well-
and I risk my life to get here, and I'm going to see my sister in this direction, and then the fucking government sends me to New York, and now I have to figure out how to get from New York to where I was going in the first
Or
place.
well, even beyond that, you
know?
guys were also forgetting the fact that my taxes in Georgia are paying for the immigration procedures that are happening on the border. These immigration facilities, these amnesty courts, things like this, these are done through the federal courts, and they are paid for by federal taxpayers. So people from all over the country are actually contributing now. The system is gunked up; it's terrible, and it's a terrible use of resources. And we can definitely change the efficiency of the system that we have, but it's federally funded. Unfortunately, ICE is federally funded in the way they do their bullshit. I think we can always remember that part of the shared burden is the fact that we have a federal government that is maintaining the immigration system, and again, it should be massively simplified, made much easier. And then we would have more dollars to go around to actually processing these people, getting them settled and back where they need to go, and getting them their start and their ability to find a job. And a lot of these people would voluntarily migrate to other places. Like you said, there's pockets of communities, of immigrant communities all over the country. And we just need to be helping to provide free market resources to where people can connect with those communities and get going. But not all of that's under the realm of the government. So
Yeah.
Again, the libertarian ideal in the world we live in.
Absolutely. Question number 6. Speaking of migrants, approximately how many asylum applications are currently pending the U.S. immigration system? 565,000, 980,000, 1.1 million, or 1.6 million?
I feel like it's just under 1 million.
It's interesting. Those guys are so close that I feel like they eliminate each other. And so I would think 1.6 million, because the difference between like 300,000 of thing, but whatever it is, it's a terrible number. James also says 1.6 million.
Let's go with James.
AJ, what you say?
I say 1.6 because of something John Stewart said. So we'll see what happens.
All right, 1.6 million. That is correct. Nearly 1.6 million asylum applications are pending the U.S. immigration courts at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Largest number of pending asylum cases on record, according to analysis of federal data. Question number 7. According to price tracker Gas Buddy, how high are gas prices in the U.S. is expected to climb in 2023? Above $4, above $5, above $7, or above $9?
National
$4.
average.
Because it's so cheap right now.
Well, also, like, and I realize this, like, gas prices in Georgia are very different from, like, say, California and New York. So I want to say above 7.
Oof.
I don't actually want to say that. I want to say that it doesn't go anywhere near 7, but
Yeah.
but I think nationally,
James says above 7.
James says 7.
With the inflationary world we live in today.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows what happens with the Middle East and Russia and Ukraine and all that fun stuff. All right, we'll try above 7. I hope not. Incorrect. It's above $4.
Oh, well,
That's
We would
Everybody
celebrate
can
for
do that.
$4 a gallon.
It's $4
Yeah.
a gallon right now in California.
yeah. So gas prices would
I
probably
mean,
be
actually, if it had been any of them, above 4 still would have been correct.
Right? That's what I was
True.
thinking.
Price is Right rules.
true. Yeah. All right. Question number 8. Kathy Whitworth, a professional golfer with the most wins in history, died at the age of 83 while celebrating Christmas Eve with family and friends. How many wins did she accumulate? 47, 62, 75, or 88? I actually know this one.
Oh, I have
So-
no idea.
It's interesting they say most wins, and they don't specify gender. So that means including men.
Yep.
So that makes me think, I was going to go with James, 62. So I think Jack Nicklaus has 47.
Sam Snead has 83.
Wow.
And I think Tiger does as well.
Interesting.
So it is 88. She
Wow.
won 88
Very
times.
happy. Woohoo.
Yeah. Winningest golfer in professional history. Question number 9. Thousands of users were unable to access which social media platform this week? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Truth?
It's Twitter.
It's got to be. I don't think there's thousands of Truth users.
Yeah.
This is true. Yeah.
Actually,
I
I
know-
know interesting. It was, it had a weird pattern to it where it was mostly web-based users and not mobile, and then mostly outside of the United States.
Yeah. The interesting thing about True Social is I know an incredible number of left folks who are on True Social. One, to monitor the stupid stuff that Donald Trump says so they can report on it, and 2, to stir the pot and be the outrageous ones. Even though, I mean, Trump's outrageous, but some of the outrageous accounts on True Social are probably left-leaning
False
folks
flags.
that they're just stirring the pot and trying to see how many people they can get to agree with their most extreme types of views. But very interesting. But Twitter went down for a little bit. Question number 10, final question. Scientists examining a slice of massive meteorite have identified what? Fossilized alien creatures, traces of water, new minerals, hieroglyphics.
I'm going to say traces of water.
Yeah.
Hieroglyphics would be pretty freaky.
Hieroglyphics would be freaky. New minerals would be pretty freaky as well. Frozen alien creatures, absolutely freaky. But yeah, I think it's traces of water. What is everybody? Oh, James Svina says
new mineral.
New mineral.
Is it unobtainium from Pandora?
Nice.
All right, we're gonna try traces of water. Let's see what happens. Oh, it's a new mineral.
Wow, nice
James is
job.
right.
Two minerals.
Two new minerals. Never before seen on Earth.
So is this going to change the periodic table?
I guess it has to.
Yeah, got to.
Oh wow.
We found space crack.
What's interesting about it is, I wonder what. Well, I guess I can read about them because everything's in numerical order. So, what are their numbers?
Does it reorder them? You know?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question.
Yeah, interesting. All right, so we got 8 out of 10 again, solid B. All right. So this week I asked because it is our dumpster fire review, the first show of 2023. What was your big news story of the year that you want to talk a little bit about? We'll start with our guest Chase. Do you got one?
Well, I had two, obviously. So the first big one was obviously this 2022 election that we had here in Georgia. We had a lot of good people running. One of them forced a runoff, so that was a big news story. Now the other thing that generally, I don't really have a general story for 2022. More like a mood for 2022. I feel like 2022 has been a year of like social anxiety as we're finally shedding this pandemic and the world is somewhat getting back to normal and things like this. There's been a lot of extra anxiety, and I just want people to just take a moment and breathe a little bit in 2023. Like take some time, make sure you reach out to the folks you love, but take a little breather. We've all been just so freaking high strung since this whole pandemic thing started a couple years back, and now that we're finally moving out of it, and just remember to love each other. Also, that is probably my the biggest one is obviously the election. It's the only thing I've been paying attention to the last year. So other than that, in recent history, watched the Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton concert from last night. It's worth it. It's the best thing that happened in 2022.
Nice. So I want to go back to that mineral question. That flat out lied. So both of those minerals. So first of all, minerals aren't elements. So elelite is Fe9PO12. So iron, phosphorus, and oxygen. And it had been synthesized in a laboratory in the 80s. These are the first naturally occurring sources of it. But both of these minerals actually had been created beforehand. So
okay, cool.
I never said I was a scientist, y'all. So I never claimed that.
Yeah.
All right. AJ, what you got for story of the year?
Oh, I don't have just one story because what the fuck was that year? I have idiocy by the numbers in 2022. How many banned books were there in 2022? Over 1,600 across 138 school districts in 32 different states. How many states introduced anti-LGBTQ legislation? 23. How many states have signed that legislation? 13. How many states immediately passed abortion bans or restrictions after Roe versus Wade was overturned? 17. Thankfully, I'm going to end on a high note. There is only one yay. There's only the one guy. There's no duplicates. Thankfully, his kids are not old enough to share opinions yet. So there we go. That's what I've got for you.
Excellent. Dan, what you got?
I was going to go with Kanye as well. The complete flip out, the rise of anti-Semitism again, when what's his name, the basketball player, doubled down.
Oh, Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, right, Kyrie Irving. It's it's interesting. It's sad that I'm old enough to have seen this cycle repeat itself. And one of the fascinating things about it is that there is always an intellectual argument behind the worst elements of anti-Semitism. Because anti-Semitism is actually starts off as an intellectual movement to explain, to say that there is a scientific reason why Jews are different and why they should be discriminated against and all that other stuff. And to see it come back and that sort of thing, it's time. It's a well-worn trope. But it was especially in the light of everything else that's blowing up. And then the one other thing that's just crazy, right? Ukraine. I mean, how insane is the Ukraine right now? And you think about it right now that Russia is blowing up power stations in the Ukraine. And this is somehow designed because they're trying to protect Ukraine, or that's how they're fighting fascism or something like that. I mean, if you're taking out power in the winter, all you're doing is trying to kill people. It's nothing else. The illusion that they're doing anything else is just insane. And so those are my crazy stories. And the Ukraine in particular is a fascinating one for libertarians to think about, because, if you were in a scenario where there was a bully in your neighborhood and he kept breaking into somebody's house and taking things out, you might all gang up and say, hey, we're not going to allow that sort of behavior anymore. What is the difference in a war of aggression like this, where the obvious goal is to kill people? Because it's not about anything else. It's not about territory. It's not about a dispute over anything else, but they're just trying to kill people. And so, I wish we didn't have a military industrial complex. I wish that we weren't taking billions of dollars collected by taxes to give to the Ukrainian people. But am I happy that they're still fighting the Russians? Yes, I am.
And I think one thing that we can say is the number one thing that we're talking about asylum requests and things like this. The number one best thing that we can do right now for the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia is to allow people who want to escape and remove themselves from the war zone to come to the United States as refugees. I can say personally that some of the best people I knew when I went to school were refugees from the Bosnian War who were themselves living in Georgia because they had successfully removed themselves from that war zone. And so I think one of the things that we need to remember is if we want to maintain ourselves as the bastion of freedom and liberty and this symbol of, if we want the Statue of Liberty to mean anything, it means helping people escape from war zones and come to this country and flourish. And that's something that we can actually do. That doesn't require us to sell out to the military industrial complex. It doesn't allow us to have to, it's just frankly being a good neighbor, right? If you see a family being abused, you can say, hey, you know what? Let me bring the kids over to grandma's house, so that way they don't have to worry about this undue aggression from the neighbor. And you guys can defend your property in the meantime. We should be doing the same thing with the innocent people of Ukraine and also the innocent people of Russia who want to get the hell out of Russia. If they can get the hell out of there, we should be letting them come to this country. Because frankly, and this is something that I will say, we have many problems in this country. We have many problems with our government. The government in this country abuses, abuses people in many ways. But we also have to remember that we should thank ourselves that we're lucky that we're not currently citizens of Russia and having to deal with their authoritarian government, because the authoritarianism that we suffer from and that we naturally fight back against as libertarians is not even close to the authoritarianism that they have over in Russia. And with the way that the government can just abuse you and arrest you if you say something or not even say something. There are people who were getting arrested for holding up blank signs during the war. And so we need to recognize that there's levels to authoritarianism and that we can fight against our government abuses while at the same time being able to call out the clear abuses of the Putin regime in Russia. And frankly, you know, we can be a critic of everybody, like that we're allowed to do that. But we just have to remember that, you know, there are people who are libertarians right now who are in Russia, who live in a much less free nation than we do right here. And they're still continuing to speak out against the abuses. And we should commend those folks. So,
And they face the very real threat of being detained at any time for any of their activities, whether it's online or in person. It's,
yeah, am I being detained is not an online joke for them. Am I being
No.
detained is a reality of their life for just being able to say things.
At the, I was going to say, at the 2014 convention, we had the president of the Russian Libertarian Party come and speak to us. It was a young woman, and she talked about all the stuff that they have to go through. Like when they go to protest, they know that they're all going to be arrested. So part of what they do is they have a bunch of people come to watch the protest who are actually in their group who aren't, but don't protest. So as soon as they see a protester get arrested, they immediately post on Facebook and Twitter, so-and-so was just arrested and taken into custody by the police. So that makes it harder for the police to disappear those people right away. I'm like, yeah, man, that's some serious planning. That's some serious shit.
No,
and
I mean,
I think we want to fight for a world that's more free and not less free, and that doesn't mean like boots in the ground and fighting around the world, but it also does mean that when we see clear authoritarianism, we should be able to call that out and not be like, oh, well, you're simping for the military-industrial complex. No, I'm not. I would call Putin a fucking asshole, whether he invaded Ukraine or not, and whether we were putting money there or not. Like, that's just my right as an individual to say Putin is a tyrant and he's a destructive force in this country or in this world for liberty. And the Russian people would do great if they would overthrow him and put a more democratic or a more representative, let's put it that way, government than just this oligarchy that's headed by a real tyrant in Vladimir Putin. So, you know, neither of those, that's not an unlibertarian thing to say. And if people think that, then they got it twisted.
And it's a shrinking oligarchy. Like the end of the year has not been kind to Russian oligarchs. They're flinging themselves
the
off
shit out of them. So I mean, but also just like like the economy in Russia is tanking because of this war. It was a stupid idea for him to invade. And the only way the war is going to end, right? Like, and I support peace, but the only way to even begin to talk about peace is for Russia to move its military out of Ukraine because they were the initial aggressors. They have to move themselves back across from whence they came before like it can be peaceful. Otherwise, this shit's going to continue with or without United States influence. Like, I'll tell you right, you know, like just because we're giving money that's not the sole reason the Ukraine's fighting. They'd be fighting regardless. Now, you know, and I can always say that the money that we're giving them is probably lining the pocket of a lot of contractors too. Like, I don't think every dollar is going towards helping the Ukrainian people fight for liberty in their country. There's a lot of people getting rich off this war, and that's the disgusting part.
Yeah, I mean that. So with these dollars that are being allocated to Ukraine, it's not really money going into the coffers of the Ukrainian government. There may be some, but for the most part, it's credits to buy military hardware.
Raytheon.
Yeah, it goes right back into the contractors. It doesn't even leave the shores of the United States. It just Treasury transfer to Raytheon, give them weapons. Yeah, it's really sad. For me, my story of 20, I almost went with Andrew Tate because that's been a funny story to watch last week. But you know, it's the rise up of the women in Iran fighting for their rights to exist, and at great personal peril. You're starting to see Iran execute people who have protested just for protesting for their right to walk down the street without a hijab on, to cut their hair, to do just basic things that we all take for granted in our society. But to have the longest protest, and it's not dying down, despite all the death threats, despite all this, you know, the threats of imprisonment and execution continues to go. And that's a great thing. It's really positive to see that, and I think that you're going to see great changes coming to Iran in the next couple of years if their government cannot be more responsive to its citizens, because this is really looking like 1978 through 79 all over again, and it's the young people pushing this to better their lives. And it's nice to see people rising up against the tyranny of their government. We've seen far too much of governments getting much more, ratcheting up their powers against their people. So to see people rising up to fight for their liberty, I will always support it, and I pray that their moves are much more successful this
Yep.
over this year.
And I would say, foreign policy is a sticky wicket. It's a very nuanced thing. It's not black and white. But I think we should support the people of Iran who are doing their protesting. But the absolute worst thing we could do is for our government to direct themselves and get involved, because that would create the blowback. That's what created the revolution in Iran, is the fact that the United States was involving itself so much in the affairs of Iran. And so I think if we want to be worldwide leaders of peace, we need to start taking the responsibility of taking the imperialist footprint away and starting to reduce our imperialist footprint. Because if we're going to encourage anti-authoritarianism around the world, we have to be anti-authoritarianism and stop insisting our will at the barrel of a gun. And instead, we need to be pushing a foreign policy that is more market-based and based in trade and mutual trust and respect. And that's how we're actually going to provide a real foreign policy moving forward. You can't do that overnight. It takes time to do that, but we have to start that process now if we want to continue to be leaders of freedom in the world, as opposed to just imposing our will with our military might. And that's something we were warned about, back in the Eisenhower days, right? And we have taken the complete wrong approach. So that we have to start that process. That was 70 years ago. And so we need to start the backtrack of that. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's not going to take 70 years either. But we have to start the process now of pushing ourselves away from insisting an imperialistic footprint around the world, because that's how we're going to have mutual respect and trading partners around the world who see us as a partner and not as an imperialist overlord. And if we want to let the world be more free, we have to be encouraging that through our own actions and foreign policy. And so, we need to stop giving the Saudis bombs to kill the Houthi rebels in Yemen with. We need to stop insisting that we have to be in complete control of what happens in Europe. Like, Europe is Europe. We are not Europe. And we need to let Europe do what Europe's going to do and not insist that it has to be exactly the way the United States wants. And we need to start, insisting again on more market-based and trade policy as opposed to bomb-based foreign policy.
Exactly. Well, Chase, thank you so much for joining us this week. I really appreciate it. Best of luck on your run. Again, tell people how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, go to votechaseoliver.com, sign up for updates, and if you can donate, please donate. And then you can also find me on Twitter at Chase for Liberty, Chase Oliver Libertarian on Facebook, and at Chase for Liberty now on TikTok and Instagram, I believe. So we're growing on all the platforms now, but I'm most active on Twitter for the moment. I just love playing in the Elon hellscape. Check me out there, but definitely sign up for updates on the website, votechaseoliver.com. And if you can donate, please do. Every dollar will go towards me traveling to speak with libertarians about a positive way forward and real positive party growth in 2024. I am not on Twitch. I will try to get on the Twitch. I just called it the Twitch because now I have to sound old. No, I'm not on Twitch. But I can.
But you can make it your Twitch.
We can get on it and figure out how to do that. So if I need to play video games, I'm just telling you right now, I'm playing Mario Kart and I'm not playing Fortnite. So just don't
Twitch, please.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I'll play some online role playing games while I talk to people. I can do that.
There you go.
There you go.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us this week. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, AJ. Thank you for making 2022 a wonderful year on the Political Deep Dive. And we'll talk to everyone next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.